The courtroom was silent, but the tension screamed louder than any noise. Andrew Callahan, once a highly respected FBI agent with a spotless record, stood in chains, staring blankly at the floor as the judge's final words echoed through the room. His breath hitched as if he'd been punched. Andrew Callahan, you are found guilty of first-degree murder. A wave of murmurs swept across the room. Reporters scribbled furiously, and spectators exchanged shocked glances. But Andrew didn't hear any of it. His pulse thumped too loudly in his ears. How had this happened? He had spent his life fighting for justice, believing in the system that now betrayed him. As he turned his head, his gaze landed on a small, familiar figure, his 10-year-old son, Ethan, sitting in the back row of the gallery with his aunt. Ethan's big brown eyes were rimmed with tears, his hands gripping the edge of the seat as if holding on for dear life. Andrew's throat tightened. Ethan, he whispered under his breath, his vision blurring. The little boy was everything to him, his only reason for enduring. Do you have any final statements before being transferred to Lockhart Federal Prison? The judge asked. Andrew stepped forward, his voice cracked and desperate. Please, can I hug my son one last time? The courtroom held its breath. The judge hesitated, then reluctantly nodded. The bailiffs unlocked Andrew's cuffs, and he knelt as Ethan ran toward him, sobbing. Andrew clutched his son like he was the only thing tethering him to reality. Between sobs, Ethan whispered, Dad, they said if you don't stop, they'll take me too. Andrew froze. His grip on Ethan tightened. Who said that? He asked urgently. But before Ethan could answer, the bailiffs pulled Andrew away, their hands cold and unrelenting. Ethan screamed, reaching for his father, but the heavy courtroom doors slammed shut. Andrew knew, in that moment, that he wasn't just an innocent man framed for murder, he was a father whose son was in terrible danger. Inside Lockhart Prison. The prison smelled like sweat, rust, and despair. Andrew was shoved into his cell, the door slamming behind him with a metallic clang that reverberated through his chest. The memories of Ethan's trembling hug haunted him. How had his life fallen apart so fast? Every time he begged someone to investigate the threats against his son, they laughed in his face. You're a murderer, Callahan. Get used to it. Across the city, Special Agent Rachel Brooks sat in her cramped office at the FBI field office in Dallas, reviewing the case files for the 100th time. She had been Andrew's partner for years, had trusted him with her life. His conviction had shattered her. But deep down, she didn't believe he was guilty. Rachel scoured the evidence, finding gaps that didn't make sense. Surveillance footage conveniently cutting off at critical moments. Key witnesses who suddenly changed their statements. A wealthy tech mogul named Vincent Drake, known for his hidden influence, seemed unusually interested in Andrew's conviction. Her gut told her Andrew was set up. And the deeper she dug, the more she realized someone was tying up loose ends, starting with Andrew's son, Ethan. A dangerous lead. Rachel's search led her to someone who might have answers, an informant named Delilah Kane, known for moving in dangerous circles. But Delilah had gone off the grid after Andrew's arrest. It took weeks, but Rachel tracked her down at a dilapidated motel on the outskirts of town. Delilah's hands shook as she unlocked her door, her eyes darting around nervously. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. I need to know the truth, Rachel pressed. Andrew Callahan was framed, and his son is being threatened. Please help me. Delilah bit her lip, then opened her burner phone, scrolling to a series of texts. They warned me to disappear. Said if I didn't, I'd end up like Andrew. Rachel's heart raced as she read the messages. One line stood out, if Callahan doesn't stay quiet, the boy will vanish. Who's behind this? Rachel asked. Delilah hesitated before whispering, Vincent Drake. And 2 agents in the bureau, high-ranking. They staged the whole thing. A risky plan. Back in prison, Andrew received a message slipped under his cell door, escape. We'll help. Trust no one. The note was unsigned, but Andrew didn't need to know who sent it. He had one mission, save Ethan. He couldn't afford to sit in prison while his son was in danger. Later that night, an inmate named Marcus, who owed Andrew a favor from their time undercover, approached him with a plan. "It won't be clean," Marcus warned. "But if you want out, this is your chance." Andrew hesitated for only a second before agreeing. The escape. The prison riot began during breakfast. Fists flew, tables flipped, and guards scrambled to contain the chaos. Andrew slipped through the mayhem, following Marcus through a hidden maintenance tunnel. Alarms blared behind them as they emerged into the night air. Rachel waited outside in an unmarked car. "Get in," she yelled. As the car sped down the highway, Andrew leaned back, his mind racing. "Where's Ethan?" he demanded. Rachel's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "Drake's men took him. I know where they're keeping him, but security is tight." Andrew's jaw clenched. "I don't care how dangerous it is. We're getting him back." The final showdown. Under the cover of darkness, Rachel and Andrew approached Drake's estate, a sprawling mansion with security cameras, guard dogs, and armed guards patrolling the perimeter. Rachel handed Andrew an earpiece and a stolen access card. "I'll guide you from here." Andrew crept through the shadows, neutralizing guards quietly. Inside, the mansion was eerily silent, the tension suffocating. He found Ethan in a locked room, huddled under a blanket. Tears streamed down the boy's face when he saw his father. "Dad!" Ethan cried, launching into Andrew's arms. But before they could escape, the door burst open. Vincent Drake stood there, flanked by armed men. "Going somewhere, Callahan," he sneered. Andrew shielded Ethan as gunfire erupted. Rachel, monitoring from outside, coordinated backup. FBI tactical teams swarmed the estate, catching Drake and his men off guard. In the chaos, Andrew fought his way out, clutching Ethan tightly. Justice served. Days later, Vincent Drake was arrested, and the corrupt agents who framed Andrew were exposed. The evidence Rachel gathered cleared Andrew's name, and the judge officially overturned his conviction. In the courtroom, Andrew knelt in front of Ethan, tears streaming down his face as he hugged his son tightly. "I told you, buddy, I'd never stop fighting for you." As the media frenzy died down, Andrew and Ethan moved to a quiet coastal town to rebuild their lives. But Andrew knew his battle wasn't over. Corruption had deeper roots than one man like Drake. He'd keep fighting, not just for Ethan, but for every innocent person who'd been silenced.